You know that feeling when your cat has spent the entire day pointedly ignoring you walking past you, sitting with their back turned, relocating every time you get too close, and then, at some completely arbitrary moment, they decide to curl up right next to you. And suddenly the entire world goes quiet. Your breathing slows. The thoughts that were racing 10 minutes ago just stop. And for the first time since you woke up that morning, you can actually, genuinely rest. If you know exactly what I'm talking about, this is going to make you feel extraordinarily seen. Let me ask you something first. When your cat knocks your coffee off the counter, makes full, unblinking eye contact with you, and does not even slightly flinch, do you get angry? Or do you feel something closer to genuine admiration for the audacity? If you chose option 2, congratulations. You're about to understand something real about why your brain works the way it does. Here's what nobody tells you about being a cat person. It isn't really about personality. It isn't about lifestyle or living situation, or whether you prefer low-maintenance pets. It's about how your nervous system processes the world, and what kind of environment it actually needs to function. Some nervous systems regulate through activity, through engagement, external feedback, constant motion, mirrored energy. Those nervous systems find dogs genuinely restorative, the enthusiasm at the door, the clear visible need, the uncomplicated demand for interaction. The energy exchange feels good. It fills something. Other nervous systems regulate through stillness, through predictability, through the complete and total absence of pressure to perform, respond, or manage someone else's emotional state. And for those nervous systems, a cat isn't just an animal. It's a regulation environment. A cat doesn't rush toward you to discharge its energy onto you. It enters a room, assesses the space, and settles into it. It lets you settle with it. There is no demand to react quickly, to match its excitement, to demonstrate how glad you are that it exists. It asks for nothing at that moment. It simply occupies the space alongside you. For people whose nervous systems spend most of the waking day in a low-level state of anticipation, monitoring, self-regulating, tracking the emotional atmosphere of every room they walk into, this is not a small thing. This is everything. When someone says, "I don't like dogs, they're too much," they are describing overstimulation. When someone says, "I like cats, they're peaceful," they are describing regulation. Cat people are not choosing distance. They are choosing environments that allow their bodies to downshift, to reduce vigilance, to rest without performing rest. And once you understand that, the bond makes a different kind of sense. The connection cat people feel with their cats is safe in a way that human relationships very often aren't. Human relationships arrive loaded with unspoken requirements. You're expected to respond quickly, to explain your feelings, to reassure, to match emotional energy in real time. Even affection comes with implicit pressure. Why aren't you more expressive? Why don't you need me the way I need you? Why does it always feel like you're holding something back? For people who are sensitive, easily overstimulated, or simply exhausted by the constant negotiation that human intimacy requires, this is genuinely draining. Not because they don't want connection, because the terms are relentless. A cat doesn't assume access to you. Its affection is offered, not imposed. When it chooses to sit near you, it does so without requiring conversation in return, without expecting eye contact, without monitoring whether your energy matches its own. And when it leaves, it offers no explanation and requires none. There is no rupture, no negotiation. Just a natural, unpressured ebb and flow. Research on cat-human bonding consistently finds that cat lovers aren't avoidant of intimacy. They're avoidant of pressure. They want closeness that unfolds at its own pace, without urgency, without demand. Cats model exactly that. They teach, entirely through behavior, that attachment doesn't require constant proof to be real. There's something even deeper in this dynamic worth naming. With a cat, affection has to be earned. Not through performance, not through persistence, but through attunement, through learning to read the subtle signals that most people never even notice. The slow blink, the particular flick of a tail, the slight shift in posture that means stay, versus the barely perceptible tension that means not right now. The change in breathing when they're comfortable versus when they're about to move. Over time, this builds a relationship rooted in genuine respect rather than assumption or control. Consent is central to how cats operate. They cannot be pressured into closeness. And for people who have experienced boundary violations of any kind in relationships, in families, in spaces where their no was repeatedly overridden, that quality is not a small detail. It is the entire point. If this is landing, if you're recognizing something in this that finally names what you've been feeling without words, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people find this conversation. And if understanding the psychology behind why you are the way you are is something you want to keep exploring, subscribe. This is exactly the work we do here. Now, let's talk about the purr. Because this is where science becomes genuinely extraordinary. A cat's purr operates at low, rhythmic frequencies, typically somewhere between 25 and 50 Hz. And your nervous system responds to those frequencies instinctively, before your conscious mind has even registered that anything is happening. Before you've thought, this is comforting, your breathing has already begun to deepen. The muscle tension you've been holding, probably without realizing it, has begun to soften. Stress hormones are dropping. The body is already adjusting. Low-frequency repetitive sounds signal safety to the brain. They tell your nervous system that nothing urgent is required right now. No action, no vigilance, no response needed, just presence, just this. For people who spend significant portions of their lives managing emotional environments, reading rooms, anticipating reactions, holding themselves in careful readiness, this kind of signal is genuinely rare. Silence can feel too empty, like something has been removed. Noise can feel overwhelming, like too much is being added. But the steady hum of a purr sits precisely in between. It fills the space without invading it. It is a company without demand. This is why so many cat people describe a settling that is difficult to explain to people who haven't felt it. Not excitement, not happiness exactly. More like their internal pace has finally, for a few minutes, matched the world around them. The nervous system finds its frequency. The co-regulation happens without a single word being spoken. Comfort without performance, presence without pressure. And your body, once it learns that this particular presence reliably brings it back into balance, begins to form attachment almost on its own. There's also the intelligence connection, which sounds flattering until you hear the full picture. Research does show that cat lovers tend to score higher on cognitive measures. But this isn't because cats make their owners smarter. It's because certain personality traits cluster together in ways that predict both cat preference and intellectual engagement. People who are more introverted tend to spend more time in solitary intellectual pursuits, reading, writing, thinking through problems at length, contemplating the general existential weight of existing in a complicated world. Denise Testerman's research at Carroll University found this correlation clearly. Cat people scored higher in cognitive abilities and openness to experience. They were also significantly higher in neuroticism, which means, in practical terms, that cat people are essentially walking, worrying encyclopedias with attachment tendencies, and somehow we've made peace with that. But here's why this connects. Deep thinking requires something very specific: uninterrupted stretches of mental quiet, sustained attention, the kind of reflective space where a thought can fully develop before the next thing arrives. Cats don't interrupt this. They coexist alongside focus without demanding it. They don't pull attention outward. Their presence fills a room without fragmenting it. This is why so many writers and artists and thinkers have built their working lives around cats. Not because a feline company generates intelligence, because cats protect the conditions that intelligence needs to function. Modern culture tends to treat solitude as a problem to be solved. Quiet gets reframed as loneliness, stillness as avoidance. But for cat people, quiet is not the absence of something. It is where clarity actually forms. And then there's the caretaking piece, which operates on a level most people never consciously notice. Ethologists describe something called the baby schema, a cluster of physical features, large eyes relative to the face, a rounded head, a small nose, soft, unhurried movements that trigger caretaking responses in the human brain before any conscious thought occurs. The brain detects these features and releases an impulse to protect and nurture before you've had any say in the matter. Domestic cats match this schema remarkably well. When your cat looks up at you, your brain is not registering a small solitary predator capable of hunting. It is registering something that looks enough like an infant to activate the full caretaking response. The caring flows outward, and crucially, it does so without demanding reciprocity in return. The cat doesn't require you to be in a particular mood. It doesn't ask you to be cheerful. It doesn't monitor your emotional state or adjust its behavior based on whether you seem okay today. For people who learned early to manage their emotional expression carefully, to be contained, to not need too much, to give more than they receive, nurturing something that doesn't intrude can feel profoundly easier than being nurtured themselves. It is closeness without vulnerability overload, caring without the exposure that being cared for requires. But here is what all of this actually adds up to. This was never really about cats. It was about the kind of nervous system you have, and the kind of world it feels safest in. If you are drawn to cats, it doesn't mean you are distant. It doesn't mean you prefer animals to people or that you've given up on human connection. It means you are wired for subtlety, for presence that doesn't demand constant output, for connection that unfolds at its own pace rather than on someone else's timeline. Cats don't ask you to perform closeness. They don't test your loyalty through manufactured distance. They don't confuse intensity with intimacy or volume with love. They simply exist with you. And for some people, that quiet, unhurried companionship is precisely what they need to feel like themselves again. There is something quietly radical about this. We live in a culture that is deeply invested in being needed, in essentialness, in constant proof of connection, in the idea that love means requiring and being required. Cat people have, perhaps without fully realizing it, chosen something different. They have chosen to love something that stays not because it depends on them to survive, but because it genuinely prefers to be there. That is not a lesser form of love. That might be the most honest form of it. So the next time your cat ignores you for 6 hours and then immediately demands your complete, undivided attention, remember, you are not simply a cat owner. You are someone whose nervous system went looking for something specific, found it, and built an attachment around it. Your cat didn't just choose you. Your body chose your cat. Does your cat seem to know exactly when you need them most before you've said a word? Sometimes before you've even realized it yourself. Leave it in the comments. You might be surprised how often that goes both ways.